This is BBC News. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. You join us at the top of the hour and we have some breaking news to bring you from the AFP news agency that Pope Francis has died. That's come from the Vatican. We just have that breaking news. Pope Francis has died. That's coming to us from the Vatican via the AFP news agency. We don't have any more details than that. This just reaching us here at BBC News in the last few minutes that Pope Francis has died. That confirmation coming through from the Vatican and coming to us via the AFP news agency. My colleague Rich Preston is with me here. Rich, just bring us up to date.
Well, Lewis, as you say, this is just come into us in the last few moments. A statement issued by Cardinal Farrell announcing with sorrow the death of Pope Francis with these words: "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow, I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis at 7:35 this morning. The Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage and universal love, especially in favour of the poorest and most marginalised." Now, the statement goes on to say, "With immense gratitude for his example as a true disciple of the Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis to the infinite merciful love of the one and true God." So that statement coming to us from the Vatican. Now, of course, Pope Francis, as many people will be aware, recently spent a considerable time in hospital with double pneumonia, including during that period being on oxygen for extended periods of time. There was a lot of concern about the Pope's health then, of course. He was released from hospital relatively recently. He did not take part in the Easter celebrations yesterday. He was there, he wrote the sermon, but he didn't give the sermon himself. We did see the Pope touring around in the Pope Mobile, seeing crowds, greeting people in St. Peter's Square. And now, Lewis, this morning, this news that Pope Francis has died at the age of 88.
Rich, thank you very much for that. We are getting more details in here and I'll let you just get across those. If you are just joining us, just want to repeat that news that we've just had in the last few minutes, the death of Pope Francis. A statement from the Vatican reads, "With deep sorrow, I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis at 7:35 this morning. The Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage and universal love, especially in favour of the poorest and most marginalised." So that news coming after the illness that we have been, of course, covering over the last few weeks here on BBC News, and his health has been watched, of course, not just at the Vatican there, but right around the world. His health seemed to be improving because we did have those recent appearances just in the last couple of days, all unexpected. There was never any promise of specific appearances that he would make, but then he has over the last few days, over this crucial Easter period, of course, for Catholics and Christians, has been making a couple of unannounced, unscheduled appearances. But the underlying nature of his health was always underlined. Serious condition with double pneumonia, of course, and extensive hospital treatment. And then just in the last few minutes, that news coming to us in a statement from the Vatican. And just to repeat that statement, a short while ago, His Eminence Cardinal Farrell announced with sorrow the death of Pope Francis with these words, quote, "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis. At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage and universal love, especially in favour of the poorest and most marginalised. With immense gratitude for his example as a true disciple of the Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis to the infinite merciful love of the one and true God. My colleague Rich Preston is with me here. Rich, we have been getting, as I mentioned, those regular updates about his health over the last few weeks.
Yes, that's right. And as you were saying, Lewis, he spent a considerable amount of time in hospital with double pneumonia. He was 88 years old, so there was concern about his time in hospital. Lots of people closely watching the news while he was in the hospital's care there. But he was released not that long ago, with doctors happy for him to return to light duties, and the Vatican stressed at the time it would be light duties that he would be engaging with. But right up to the wire, he was meeting with J.D. Vance recently. He was present at Easter celebrations just yesterday in Vatican City, and then this news this morning announcing his death at 7:30 in the morning, local time, 7:35 this morning, according to the statement. Now, as I said, the Pope Francis was 88. He was the first Latin American leader of the Roman Catholic Church. And throughout his time, both as a priest and latterly as Pope, he saw himself as one of the people. He said, "My people are poor, and I am one of them." He was born in Buenos Aires in 1936 and was ordained as a priest in 1969 before becoming the provincial of the Jesuits in Argentina in 1973. And then it was in 2013 he was elected as Supreme Pontiff. And as I said, throughout his time, Lewis very much saw himself as one of the people, working to help, in particular, poorer people and those who needed the Church's love and support.
That's right, and working right up until the end, because although clearly his duties were much more restricted than would normally be the case around the Easter celebrations there in the Vatican, he still was working and making an unannounced scheduled appearances, and of course US Vice President J.D. Vance just over the weekend visiting Italy and Vatican City, and J.D. Vance then continuing his tour into India, but just showing the fact that he was still working and still very much involved with not only the Christian celebrations around Easter time, but also part of the diplomatic and political world that he inevitably inhabited and was clearly a strong part of, and perhaps representation of his style of leadership. There were confrontations between the US's policies, for example, towards immigration and his stance. There had been a reported clash over issues like that. But right now, the world and the millions of Catholics around the world will just be absorbing the news that Pope Francis has died at the age of 88, with words from the Vatican just a short time ago, in the last 30 minutes or so, a statement from the Vatican, and I'll just bring that to you. The statement reads, "A short while ago, His Eminence Cardinal Farrell announced with sorrow the death of Pope Francis with these words: 'Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow, I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis. At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his Church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage, and universal love, especially in favour of the poorest and most marginalised.' He had, of course, been ill for several weeks, receiving hospital treatment, but he had been released from hospital, and he had been making a few unscheduled, unannounced appearances to wish people happy Easter. Pretty obviously significant time of year, very busy administratively, logistically, and of course spiritually. Easter, a crucial time in the Christian calendar, and so he would normally be on a full work schedule during this period of time, but given the pneumonia, given the hospital treatment, he was not committed to the full schedule of appearances and work during this time of year. But he did make unannounced, unscheduled appearances. He appeared at Vatican St. Peter's Square to wish happy Easter to thousands of worshippers. At 88-year-old, he was using a wheelchair at that point just a few days ago, and he waved from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, saying, "Dear brothers and sisters, happy Easter." His traditional Easter address, though, was delivered by a clergy member. After the blessing, the Pope was driven around the square. He passed through the crowds, pausing a number of times. Babies brought over to him, as is traditional. So although he wasn't taking a full role in the Easter celebrations, there was certainly a visibility and a determination to keep on working and to keep on serving. But this morning, just in the last hour now, the news coming through that Pope Francis has died at the age of 88. We are starting to get reaction in now. My colleague Rich Preston is here with me. Rich, just talk us through it.
Well, Lewis, the Dutch Prime Minister has been amongst the first to pay tribute, Dick Schoof, saying Pope Francis was in every way a man of the people. The global Catholic community bids farewell to a leader who recognised the burning issues of our day and called attention to them. Now, of course, these tributes will continue to pour in over the coming hours. A vast global Catholic community led by Pope Francis. And as I was saying earlier, during his tenure as Pope, he very much saw himself as a man of the people and wanted to unify the Catholic community, and saw the Church's role as very much being one of helping and supporting those who needed the Church's love and help. Now, as you mentioned, Lewis, he was working right up to the wire. We saw him at Easter celebrations yesterday when he was released from hospital. He almost immediately started engaging in what were described as light duties. He still wanted to work. He still wanted to do his job. He met the US Vice President just the other day. As much as he didn't give the Easter sermon yesterday in the Vatican, he did write the homily. And as you said, he then went out in the Pope-mobile onto the streets, and we saw him. We carried the footage ourselves here of him greeting people, being handed babies to bless, smiling, engaging with the crowds. He very much saw himself as a man of the people. He described himself as one of them. "My people are poor and I am one of them," he said on more than one occasion. He was the first Latin American Pope. Very much saw that as an important part of his identity. Of course, a huge Catholic community across Latin America as well. So this will be felt very deeply there, still early in the morning in that part of the world. But as I say, at the moment, we've got Dick Schoof, the Dutch Prime Minister, saying Pope Francis was in every way a man of the people. The global Catholic community bids farewell to a leader who recognised the burning issues of our day and called attention to them.
Well, you mentioned there he was in many ways a Pope of firsts. He was the first Pope from the Americas, first from the Southern Hemisphere. In fact, not since the year 741. And there'd been a non-European Bishop of Rome, also the first Jesuit to be elected. So in many ways a pioneer, in many ways he led in a new and different direction, but despite those reforms, he remained popular among traditionalists as well. It is always, of course, in that role, a balancing act, a tightrope if you are an individual who wants to push forward with reforms or modernisations in any part of the institution. Of course, the huge wing of traditionalists, it is a balancing act to straddle both spheres, and that's certainly what he tried to do. He became Pope back in 2013. He was already in his 70s when he became Pope in 2013. But now the world will just be absorbing the news that Pope Francis has died at the age of 88. Just going to bring you that statement again from the Vatican. A short while ago, His Eminence Cardinal Farrell announced with sorrow the death of Pope Francis with these words: "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow, I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis. At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his Church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage, and universal love, especially in favour of the poorest and most marginalised. With immense gratitude for his example as a true disciple of Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis." So we are getting some reaction. We have already heard from the Dutch Prime Minister saying that Pope Francis was in every way a man of the people. The global Catholic community bids farewell to a leader who recognised the burning issues of our day and called attention to them. And he did do that, and sometimes that would mean a clash with global leaders, with politicians, with parts of his own Catholic community. But he did manage to remain popular with so many branches of the Church and lead so many Catholics around the world who will all now be absorbing the news that at the age of 88, Pope Francis has died. His illness had been very public, pneumonia, his treatment, medication, procedures, often made public, his hospital visits. And there was a sense of not things returning to normal, that would be too far, but a return to duties, to light duties, a clear determination from Pope Francis to be involved in the Easter celebrations and commemorations and services and rituals at the Vatican. Such a crucial time of year for Catholics and for Christians. And he was determined to play a role, and he did. He was seen in public, he did speak, he did wish people happy Easter, but that was not the beginning of a return to full duties. And the news will be a shock now to so many, especially those who had hoped that his recent appearances were a sign of a return to better health, and there would be many people who would have been hopeful of that. But those light duties were not a signal of a full return to health. And this now, the news that Pope Francis has died at the age of 88. And I mentioned that we were getting some reaction in from world leaders, and my colleague Rich is with me here. What reaction are we getting?
Well, continuing to see responses from world leaders paying tribute to Pope Francis. Germany's Chancellor in waiting, Friedrich Merz, says Francis will be remembered for his tireless commitment to the weakest members of society, to justice and reconciliation. We've also heard from the Swiss president saying Pope Francis was a great spiritual leader, a tireless advocate for peace. His legacy will remain. We've also heard from Iran, Lewis. Iran offering its condolences after the death of Pope Francis. That coming from an Iranian government spokesperson. We heard earlier from the Dutch Prime Minister, Dick Schoof, saying Francis was in every way a man of the people. The global Catholic community bids farewell to a leader who recognised the burning issues of our day and called attention to them. The Pope, as we know, was recently in hospital with double pneumonia for an extended period of time. He was released not that long ago to start undertaking light duties. He was very keen, the Vatican said, to get back to work. We saw him yesterday at Easter celebrations in the Vatican. He wrote the homily for these celebrations yesterday. He didn't give the speech himself, but he did write it, and he was present throughout the ceremony. And then afterwards, we saw him head down to the streets to meet the people. And it was clear throughout his tenure that he saw that as a very key part of his role, meeting the people, being with the people and working for the people. Just in the last few minutes, the Scottish First Minister, John Swinney, has described Pope Francis as a voice for peace, tolerance and reconciliation. That was as he paid tributes to the news, saying he heard that news with deep sadness this morning. He went on to say that Francis brought comfort, assurance and hope to many. May he rest in peace, Lewis.
Yes, and of course people will turn and think about his legacy, his achievements, his failures. Referenced earlier, of course, that job of balancing, of straddling the factions within the Catholic Church, the conservative branch and a more progressive branch. And he, of course, at times upset both. Some on the more progressive wing, feeling not going far enough, potential social issues. Conservatives saying going too far on those traditional Catholic values. And so he had a constant job of trying to balance the different opinions within the Catholic Church, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully. Certainly outside the Catholic Church, when he travelled the world, he was certainly popular. He could draw crowds, not just amongst Christians and Catholics, but his words and work and commitment to serving the poor and underprivileged in the world drew him plenty of fans and supporters across the world, not just Christians and not just Catholics. But he did, of course, when he came to power, inherit in a lot of ways a church with many deep-seated problems, many historical problems, current problems. Of course, the child abuse scandal was a huge part of many of the years where he was in charge of the church. He did try to project a simpler, I suppose, model, a pared back image of the Pope and the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, deliberately trying to project that image of humility and a humble approach to himself and the way he carried himself. And as I mentioned, a Pope of firsts in many ways, the first Latin America leader of the Roman Catholic Church. He took over in 2013, already in his 70s then, and now in the last hour, the news coming through from the Vatican that at the age of 88, after that period of severe ill health, pneumonia, the Vatican confirming that Pope Francis has died. And as we mentioned, we are starting to get the reaction in of world leaders, not just, of course, the millions of people waking up around the world and just tuning in and observing and absorbing the news. We are getting world leader reaction, as you expect. Pope Francis, a global figure, and we have heard from the French President, Emmanuel Macron, saying this: Pope Francis was a man of humility, on the side most vulnerable and the most fragile. So that from the French President, Emmanuel Macron, who's on a trip to Mayotte at the moment, meeting people there. But him making this message. Pope Francis was a man of humility, on the side of the most vulnerable and most fragile. And as my colleague Rich, who's with me here, mentioned as well, Iran offering condolences over the death of Pope Francis as well. The Swiss president saying the Pope was a great spiritual leader, a tireless advocate for peace. His legacy will remain. So as we start to run through these messages, Israel's President Herzog saying this: Pope Francis was a man of deep faith, peace and compassion. And given the news is not even an hour old, Rich, we will expect now plenty more messages to come in from right around the world.
Absolutely, Lewis, and especially given the Pope's goal, his aims during his time in office for interfaith reconciliation. That was a key part of his mission. On one occasion, he kissed the Orthodox Patriarch Kirill of Moscow. That was an historic encounter. That was a joint call they made for freedom of belief there. He energized Vatican diplomacy. He saw the Vatican as key in bridging divides around the world. He helped facilitate an historic rapprochement between the US and Cuba. He encouraged the peace process in Colombia. And of course, there are social issues as well that crossed his desk, whether that's around same-sex marriage, whether that's war and conflict around the world. He very much saw it as his role to facilitate meetings, conversations right up to the wire. He was meeting foreign leaders, including the US Vice President J.D. Vance just the other day. So, as you say, we are seeing tributes starting to come in, including from countries like Iran sending their condolences, but as well as that, the French President, the Dutch PM, German officials, Isaac Herzog of Israel, calling him a man of deep faith, peace and compassion who fostered ties with the Jewish world. We will continue to see tributes come in from around the world. Francis was, of course, from Argentina. It's still early in the morning in Latin America, so many people will be waking up to this news in the coming hours. We'll expect the tributes to continue to pour in then after this news of the death of Pope Francis at the age of 88.
And it's just to underline the impact around the world, not just within the Catholic community or Christians around the world. His global impact, he visited 60 plus countries whilst Pope. He is someone whose words and actions and principles spread far and wide and would have been heard by so many people around the world, of different faiths, of no faith at all. He was someone who grabbed the media attention wherever he travelled, and travel he did, 60 plus countries in his time as Pope. He became Pope in 2013, already in his 70s then, and continued that schedule throughout his 70s and throughout his 80s and right up until the end, making appearances over this Easter period in the Vatican, coming out, greeting people at this crucial time of year for Christians. He couldn't play the full role in the celebrations, in the services, in the spiritual guidance that the Pope would like to have played and would have normally played, of course, during normal periods, but his health was not strong enough. He played a smaller role like